I walked into the annual gala wearing a dress redder than the wine my aunt spilled when she finally recognized me. They thought I came begging for scraps after 15 years of silence. But I didn't come to join the party. I came to evict them. The hem of my crimson silk gown brushed against the marble floor of the grand ballroom, a sound that used to terrify me. 15 years ago, the sound of footsteps in this hall meant punishment. It meant I hadn't scrubbed the grout hard enough, or I was being summoned to take the blame for something my cousin Serafina had broken. But tonight, the click of my heels sounded like a gavel striking a judge's block. The Heritage Plaza. To the guests sipping champagne and nibbling on caviar, it was just the premier venue in the city, a historic landmark of opulent architecture and old money. To the Thorne family, it was their cash cow, the only thing keeping them relevant in high society. To me, it was a cage I had escaped, and a cage I had just bought the key to. I paused at the top of the grand staircase. The air smelled of expensive perfume, lilies, and the distinct metallic scent of greed. Below me, 300 of the city's elite mingled under the crystal chandeliers. And there they were, the unholy trinity of my trauma. Aunt Beatrice was holding court near the ice sculpture, wearing a diamond necklace that I knew for a fact was a replica, because I owned the original. Uncle Julian was sweating through his tuxedo, frantically whispering to a group of men in sharp gray suits. And Serafina, dear cousin Serafina, was laughing, her head thrown back, basking in the attention she had done absolutely nothing to earn. They looked so comfortable, so secure. They had absolutely no idea that the ground beneath their feet had already been sold. I began my descent. To understand why I was about to burn their lives to the ground, you have to understand the night I left. I wasn't just kicked out, I was erased. I was 18, an orphan taken in by my father's brother, Julian, and his wife, Beatrice. They loved the public image of benevolence, taking in the poor, tragic niece. Behind closed doors, I was the help. I was the scapegoat. I wore Serafina's old clothes while she got couture. I studied by candlelight because Beatrice said electricity was expensive and charity cases don't get overhead lighting. The night of my exile was the night of the winter solstice party. Serafina had stolen a heavy gold bracelet from a guest, a senator's wife. When the theft was discovered, the panic in the house was palpable. A scandal like that would ruin Uncle Julian's political aspirations. They needed a culprit, and they needed one fast. I remember being dragged out of my attic room. Beatrice gripped my arm so hard her nails drew blood. They planted the bracelet in my school bag. I screamed, I cried, I begged them to check the security cameras, but Julian had already wiped the footage. "You are a thief," Uncle Julian had spat at me, his face purple with faux righteous indignation, "just like your mother." That was the line that broke me. My mother was a saint who died working 2 jobs to keep me fed before the accident. They threw me out the back entrance of the Heritage Plaza into the sleet. No coat, no money, just the clothes on my back and a trash bag with a few books. Beatrice stood in the doorway, the warmth of the manor spilling out around her silhouette. "Don't ever come back, Isadora," she hissed. "If you do, I'll have you arrested. You're dead to us. You don't exist." She slammed the heavy oak door. The sound echoed in my nightmares for a decade. For the first few years, I survived on spite alone. I washed dishes. I cleaned toilets. I slept in shelters where you had to sleep with your shoes on so they wouldn't get stolen. But I had something they didn't account for: my grandfather's brain. Grandfather Silas Thorne built the plaza. He was a ruthless businessman, but he had a soft spot for me. He died when I was 12, but before he passed, he taught me things. He taught me about leverage, about contracts, about the importance of reading the fine print. While I was scrubbing floors during the day, I was studying at night. Community college, then a scholarship to university, then law school. I specialized in property law and corporate acquisition. I clawed my way up from the gutter, fueled by the memory of the sleet hitting my face that night. I started a boutique firm, then I invested. Tech startups, real estate flips, high-risk assets that paid off. By the time I was 30, I was a silent partner in 3 major hedge funds. By 33, I had enough liquid capital to buy the Thorne family 10 times over. But I didn't want to just buy them. I wanted to teach them a lesson. I hired a private investigator 3 years ago. The report was pathetic. The Thornes were broke. They were leveraging the plaza to pay for their lifestyle. They were drowning in debt, keeping up appearances while the foundation rotted. And then the opportunity arose. They were planning to sell the Heritage Plaza. Not just sell it, they were going to sell it to a developer who planned to demolish it and build a generic shopping mall. They were going to destroy grandfather Silas's legacy for a quick payout to cover their gambling debts and Serafina's shopping addiction. But there was a snag they thought was a myth. Grandfather Silas didn't trust his son Julian. He knew Julian was weak. So Silas had created a shadow deed, a founding document. It stated that the Heritage Plaza could never be sold without the signature of the keeper of the seal. Julian and Beatrice thought the seal was lost. They thought the clause had expired. They forged documents claiming sole ownership. They didn't know that on his deathbed, Grandfather Silas had pressed a small, heavy brass key into my 12-year-old hand and whispered, "Box 404 at the First National. Keep it safe, Isa. It's your shield." I found the box when I was 25. Inside wasn't money. It was the original deed, the real deed, and it named me, Isadora Thorne, as the sole trustee and executor of the estate upon my 18th birthday, bypassing Julian entirely. Technically, they had been trespassing in my house for 15 years. Back to the gala. I reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted. My dress was a statement, aggressive, vibrant, undeniable. I wasn't the mousy girl in the gray wool sweater anymore. I was a force of nature. I took a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. He looked at me stunned. "Ma'am?" "Thank you," I said, my voice smooth as velvet. I walked straight toward them. Serafina saw me first. She blinked, her Botoxed forehead struggling to frown. She leaned toward her mother. "Mom, who is that? That dress is a season old, isn't it?" Always the catty remark first. She hadn't changed. Beatrice turned. She was holding a glass of red wine, a vintage Bordeaux, likely taken from the cellar reserve I knew Grandfather had been saving for his 80th birthday. She squinted. Her eyesight was failing, but her instincts for danger were sharp. I stopped 3 feet from them. "Hello, Aunt Beatrice," I said. The color drained from her face so fast it looked like a physical blow. Her hand trembled. The wine sloshed over the rim, splashing onto the cream-colored gown and the polished floor. Smash! The glass hit the tiles. Silence rippled outward from us like a shockwave. The music didn't stop, but the conversations did. "Isadora?" Beatrice whispered. It sounded like a choke. Uncle Julian spun around. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. "It can't be. You're gone." "I was exiled," I corrected, raising my voice slightly so the nearby circle of vultures could hear. "There's a difference. Gone implies I left willingly. Exiled implies you threw a teenager into the street in the middle of winter." Serafina stepped forward, her eyes narrowing. "What are you doing here? Security, someone get this trash out of here." I laughed. It was a cold, dark sound. "Oh, Serafina," You always were quick to call for help when you were frightened. But I wouldn't bother the guards. They work for the venue owners. And since you don't actually own the venue, they don't work for you. Don't be ridiculous, Julian sputtered, trying to regain his composure as the investors from the Sterling Group watched with raised eyebrows. We are the Thorns. We are the Heritage Plaza. Are you? I took a sip of my champagne. Because the rumor is you're trying to sell it tonight, to these gentlemen here. I nodded at the men in gray suits. Mr. Sterling, the lead investor, stepped forward. He was a shark, but a rational one. Julian, who is this woman? You told us there were no other claimants to the title? There aren't, Julian shouted, sweat beading on his upper lip. She's a fraud, a disowned relative looking for a handout. Isadora, I'll give you $1,000 to leave right now. Don't make a scene. $1,000? I swirled the liquid in my glass. 15 years ago, $1,000 would have saved my life. It would have kept me off the streets. It would have bought me a coat. But tonight, Uncle, $1,000 wouldn't even cover the dry cleaning for this dress. I set my glass down on a passing tray and walked toward the small stage where the microphone stood. "Stop her!" Beatrice shrieked. "She's insane!" 2 security guards stepped forward. I held up a hand, not in surrender, but in command. I reached into my clutch and pulled out a single piece of paper. It wasn't the deed itself, that was safe in a vault, but a notarized injunction. I am Isadora Thorn, I announced, my voice projecting without the mic, trained in courtrooms to command attention. And I am the legal owner of the Heritage Plaza. The guards hesitated. They looked at Julian, then at me. I radiated authority. Julian radiated panic. They stepped back. I walked up the steps to the stage. I tapped the microphone. Thump, thump. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began. The room went dead silent. "I apologize for the interruption. My name is Isadora Thorn. 15 years ago, the people standing before you, my family, framed me for a crime I didn't commit and threw me out of this very building to protect their own reputation." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I saw the senator's wife, the one whose bracelet was stolen, standing near the back. She looked older, but she was listening. "For 15 years," I continued, locking eyes with Beatrice, "they have lived in luxury while I scraped by. But they made a mistake. They forgot that this building, this legacy, was built by Silas Thorn, and Silas Thorn didn't leave it to his son. He left it to the only person who actually cared about the bricks and mortar, not just the bank account." I motioned to the projector screen behind me, usually reserved for charity slideshows. With a click of a remote I had palmed from the podium, having prearranged this with the AV technician, a man named Dave I'd hired 3 days prior, an image appeared. It was the deed, the original 1985 deed of trust, and at the bottom, highlighted in glowing red digital marker, beneficiary Isadora Thorn. Condition: upon reaching the age of majority, full title transfers immediately. Any attempt by guardians to liquidate assets voids their residency rights. This, I pointed to the screen, is the legal title. My Uncle Julian has been forging his ownership for a decade and a half, which means every contract he signed, every loan he took out against this property, is fraud. I looked down at the Sterling Group investors. "Mr. Sterling, if you sign that purchase agreement tonight, you aren't buying a building. You're buying a felony indictment for receiving stolen property." Mr. Sterling looked at Julian. The look was murderous. He closed his portfolio. "Is this true, Julian?" "It's a lie! It's a forgery!" Julian screamed, his voice cracking. He rushed the stage, but this time the security guards intercepted him. They didn't know who to trust, but they knew angry men rushing the stage were a liability. "Let me go! She's a witch!" Julian flailed. I leaned into the mic. "I'm not a witch, Uncle. I'm a landlord, and you are 15 years late on your rent." The crowd erupted. It was chaos. The veneer of polite society shattered instantly. People were pulling out phones, recording. This was better than the opera. This was a public execution of a socialite dynasty. Beatrice was sobbing now, clutching Serafina. Serafina, for once, was silent, staring at the screen where her name was noticeably absent. I walked down the stairs, the crowd parting for me like the Red Sea. I walked straight to the investors. "Gentlemen," I said coolly, "the Heritage Plaza is not for sale. It will never be demolished. It is a historical landmark, and I intend to restore it. If you want to do business, call my office on Monday. If you want to sue Julian for wasting your time, I can recommend a good lawyer." Mr. Sterling actually cracked a smile. "You have guts, Miss Thorne. We'll be in touch." He signaled his team and they walked out, leaving Julian hyperventilating in the grip of the security guard. I turned to my family. The room was watching. This was the moment, the ultimatum. Beatrice, Julian, Serafina. I said their names like curses. "You have two choices." They looked up. Hope flickered in Julian's eyes. He thought I was going to offer a settlement. "Choice 1, I raised a finger. "You admit to everything, right here, right now. You tell this room that you framed me. You tell them Serafina stole the bracelet. You tell them you forged the deed. You apologize, publicly and unequivocally." Beatrice straightened up, her pride trying to fight through the humiliation. "And if we do?" "If you do, I will give you 1 month to move out. I will give you a small stipend, enough to rent a modest apartment in the city. I won't press criminal charges for the fraud." Serafina's jaw dropped. "A modest apartment? Are you joking?" "Choice 2, I continued, my voice dropping an octave, becoming ice cold. "You refuse. You cling to your pride, in which case the police are waiting outside. I have already filed the charges for fraud, embezzlement, and forgery. You will be evicted tonight. You will leave with nothing but the clothes on your backs, just like I did, and I will spend every penny of my fortune ensuring you rot in a cell." The silence stretched. It was agonizing. Uncle Julian looked at the crowd. He looked at his wife. He looked at the exit. Julian started. "Don't you dare," Beatrice hissed. "We are thorns. We do not bow to this gutter rat." "Then you choose ruin," I said. I pulled out my phone and dialed a single number. "Send them in." The double doors at the back of the hall burst open. 4 uniformed police officers walked in, followed by a man in a suit, my attorney. "Julian Thorne, Beatrice Thorne," the officer announced. "We have a warrant for your arrest regarding multiple counts of wire fraud and grand larceny." The gasps turned into murmurs of shock. "No!" Beatrice screamed as the officer grabbed her wrist. "Get your hands off me! Do you know who I am?" "Yes," I said, standing over her as she was cuffed. "You're a trespasser." Serafina tried to slip away into the crowd. "Officer!" I called out. "The daughter is an accomplice. She signed the fraudulent loan applications as a witness. I have the documents." Serafina froze. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. Real tears this time. "Isa, please. We're cousins. We're family." I looked at her. I looked for any shred of pity in my heart. I looked for the little girl I used to play with before she learned to hate me. I found nothing. "Family doesn't frame family," I said softly. "Family doesn't leave family to freeze in the street." I watched as they were led away. The flash of cameras went off like strobe lights. It was a humiliating parade. The guests, people they had tried to impress for decades, were the witnesses to their downfall. As the doors closed behind them, the room remained quiet, everyone looking at me. I was the last thorn standing, the black sheep who had returned as the wolf. I turned back to the microphone. "The gala is over," I said. "Please vacate the premises. My renovation team arrives at 6 a.m. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't wait for networking. I turned and walked out the side door, the one leading to the private gardens. The night air was cool, but it wasn't biting like it was 15 years ago. I walked to the edge of the terrace and looked out over the city lights. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. "They're in custody. Bail denied due to flight risk. It's done, Isadora." I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding since I was 18. I had spent 15 years building a fortress of money and power around myself, driven by the need to see this moment, to see the look on Beatrice's face, to hear the snap of the handcuffs. It felt satisfying, but also hollow. The victory was absolute, but the damage they did to the girl I used to be was permanent. No amount of money could buy back the childhood they stole. No deed could erase the memory of the cold. But then I looked up at the facade of the Heritage Plaza. The stone gargoyles looked down at me. For the first time, they didn't look menacing. They looked like guardians. I walked over to the fountain where I used to wish for a fairy godmother to save me. I sat on the edge, the crimson dress pooling around me. I dipped my hand into the water. It was cold. "I saved myself," I whispered to the night. The ruin of the Thorne family was complete. Their reputation was ash. Their assets were mine. Their future was a prison cell. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and walked back inside my building. The next morning, the demolition crew didn't arrive. Instead, a restoration crew did. I spent the next year scrubbing the rot out of the plaza. I fired the staff who had been complicit in my abuse. I hired people who needed a second chance. People from the shelters, people with records who were trying to turn their lives around. I turned the East Wing, Beatrice's favorite wing, into a scholarship center for underprivileged youth. I turned Julian's office into a legal aid clinic, and Serafina's room, I walled it up. I literally bricked over the door. It doesn't exist anymore. Sometimes, late at night, I walk the empty halls. I think about my aunt and uncle, currently serving 8 to 10 years in federal prison. Serafina got a plea deal, probation, and community service. I hear she's working at a diner in New Jersey. I hope she's learned the value of tipping. People ask me if I regret being so harsh, if I regret not taking the apology that they never really offered. I tell them this: when you plant seeds of cruelty, you don't get to be surprised when the harvest is poison. I didn't ruin them. I just returned the deed to its rightful owner. Karma just happened to be the one who served the eviction notice. And as for the red dress, I had it framed. It hangs in the foyer now, a warning to anyone who enters. The owner is in, and she remembers everything.